So far, the Junkions from both Legacy and 86 have all been winners, but they can't possibly keep that up forever, right? Well, let's find out. It's Legacy Trashmaster. But first, your likes! Please give. And if you enjoyed this video by the end and you aren't subscribed already, please consider it. This is a figure that people keep joking should be voiced by Danny DeVito because of his name, and while that's at least a little amusing, I don't agree. This looks like animated Bulkhead if he caught cosmic rust, so I can't hear any other voice coming out of that face other than that non-southern Forrest Gump's drawl. Though he is perhaps a bit more fit than Bulkhead, maybe this is his big brother or something. The first thing I want to say is that this dude's concept art was way cooler. The colors are way better, and I understand what it was going for way more. This is definitely an incredibly watered-down version of what it was intended to be. And while that would have been one of the all-time sickest-looking bots, that doesn't mean that this looks bad. Being less cool than the coolest thing ever is kind of to be expected. And this guy is still pretty damn cool-looking. The first thing I want to do, though, is pull off the butt flaps and then put them on his backpack. I think that this looks a little better, and it gives his legs more room to work. Though it does have the unfortunate side effect of adding some part swarming to a transformation that didn't require it, but actually secretly already did, since this part has to come off no matter what. When all said and done, though, this does look like a pretty badass bruiser in the heavier weight classes of Cybertron's non-actual giants. The weirdest thing about this is just how much it looks like an animated figure. It doesn't quite gel well with the rest of the Legacy chugification. Though it does look really good standing next to Bulkhead. As long as they're next to each other, it kind of bridges him into looking like he belongs with the rest. He's so jacked and tough looking, it's pretty awesome. And despite him being borderline monochromatic, he actually has a good bit of color breakup, with a fair amount of paint. It's pretty evenly distributed throughout him, and he has pretty much a half dozen varieties of plastic. He's got orange, brown, dark gray, dark gray, and I think his fists may be a third yet darkest gray. And then some of the brown is actually paint, and it's really well color matched. That kind of speaks to the general QC on this guy because this thing feels top tier. Everything is perfectly tight, giving you exactly the level of hold and resistance that you want it to. And this is the first of all the weaponizers whose joints don't just fall off, to the point where I didn't even realize till making this video that his legs come off. I just thought that these were normal mushroom pegs in the knees letting them rotate. Instead, now I need to figure out what I can use these for in some horrible vehicle abomination. However, for the most part, this guy is a pretty lame weaponizer. His legs come off, his butt panel comes off, and that's pretty much all she wrote for usable components from this guy. Everything else pretty much stays intact except for these really annoying pieces stuck to his stomach side skirts, which are overall almost entirely useless parts. It's pretty much best to pull these off and stick them down here. But now you've made a non-mandatory parts warmer that has one mandatory parts warming piece and then two recommended parts warming pieces. Truly, this gimmick has died a miserable death with this figure. A dude who breaks down into a bunch of accessories for figures to use and it doesn't parts form to transform, who breaks down into like 3 things, almost none of it usable, and whose transformation uses parts forming multiple times. This is the thing that everyone feared a weaponizer would be when they were announced. That might sound a little dire, but I don't intend it to. All that means is that it's bad at being a weaponizer who doesn't parts form, or whatever kind of izer this is. Junkizer, truckizer, whatever. It can be a good weaponizer who still parts forms, just like majority of them have been up until this point. I mean, at least it parts forms less. Head looks like Bulkhead if he joined a motorcycle gang. I really don't like the ear cones, and I think that this would look way cooler without them, but I am here for the mohawk. Again, I think this would be better in the original colors, as the more yellowy tangerine would have made his red visor stand out, at least a lot more so than against the blood orange of the rest of him. And have I mentioned enough yet that I think this concept art fucks? So this is a pretty good looking, really great feeling robot mode that I would honestly like more if I'd never seen the concept art. Though at the same time, I still think I would know something was off about it, because this feels like something that has a vision that was unfulfilled. It just looks so clearly like something that was scaled back, but at the same time, the worst thing about the way this looks is just the colors not giving him enough life. By the way, Hasbro, you need to come up with a Junkion faction badge. Get on it. Now, the accessory this guy gets is a little confusing. It's something like the Jaws of Life replacing his fist. You are kind of best off using the inner peg, as it lets you get more bend out of the elbow, and watch out for the lower jaw, that loves to pop off. But yeah, I can't say that this really inspires me. I can charitably describe this as an upgrade to his punches on a dude who, at the very least, seems like he either has blasters built into his fists, knuckle dusters built into his fists, or punch guns built into his fists. I just don't see the value of a crab hand in the face of that. Now, posability is excellent. Head swivels and has a really ugly up, shoulders pull slightly more than a 90 with backwards butterfly, elbows bend a massive amount more than a 90, wrist swiv, legs are extra unimpeded forward and really impeded out to the side and back, but you can get more out of the back by removing the butt flap kibble. Normal 90 knees, and feet with a huge toe up, toe down, and a small rocker in both directions. Very little on this dude is amazing, but it's overall better enough than the average to really give this a lot of mobility. I mean, when was the last time you saw a guy that looked like this much of a bruiser get into a sprinter's pose? So this is definitely a really high point to the figure. The transformation is also pretty strong. Just remember to flip the arms back before you hinge him at the waist. There's nothing really amazing, out of the ordinary, or all that interesting here, but what is there is a solid repertoire of pretty standard steps that is punctuated by an aggressively satisfying set of clicks and snaps. It all comes together so pleasingly, and the parts forming probably manages to be the most unique step because the claw has to be angled up before you can peg it in, and then it swoops down under his horrible fist nipples. Maybe that's why they made him more red than yellow. And then the alt mode is really ropey. Somehow this really big dude turned into a minuscule garbage truck, but my main problem is that this doesn't even remotely look like said garbage truck. It's kind of trying to be evocative of one in some way, ways, but the color breakup that worked so well in the robot mode just looks like a cluster bomb on this thing. The sides look like Jackson Pollock took a paint can into it, just being a catastrophe of colors leading into each other with no rhyme or reason. The exhausts are two-tone, the cab leading into the tire switches colors seemingly because they wanted the lower frame to be all brown, but then the gas tank is mounted on a beige part that very easily could have been the brown plastic of the rest of it, and even if it wasn't, the front wheel section is entirely painted brown, so why not that part? The shape is just wrong. This looks more like a dump truck in the back rather than a garbage truck. Oh, and real quick question. This is a garbage truck, right? Like, it's designed to pick up dumpsters and then dump them somewhere in the back that they didn't model at all, right? So, where the fuck are his tines? Like, guys, I think you forgot to include an extra pair of accessories that are probably supposed to mount on these pegs. Because right now, this guy can't do the one thing that a garbage truck is known to do. How the fuck did you forget his fork? Or did someone think that we wouldn't notice the vehicle's most iconic feature is missing? Then there's the vehicle combinations, which don't work the best here. You can give him Scraphook's engine section, which doesn't look like anything that's supposed to exist. Though this does still roll quite well, which the normal version does as well. Unfortunately, no combined mode today, by the way, as I still lack an axle grease to combine with these. But then you try to give the front of the truck mode to Scraphook, and while it does go on and look like something fun and kind of have a vibe, doing this completely immobilizes the wheels, since they're now grinding down the sides of the alt mode. But at least it looks deliberate, even keeps this line going. Unfortunately, both halves of this part have ports and not pegs on the insides, so they need an adapter along the sides of Crashbar to work with him, and if you get real creative with Crashbar's handlebars, you can give them as a side saddle to Scraphook. Unfortunately, the spacing of Scraphook's knees is different than Trashmaster's, as his hips are actually wider apart than on the older figure, so you have to split these and just fake it if you want to use this part as Trashy's rear wheels. But if you're faking it, you might as well go all the way, which kind of requires a second Crashbar because these tabs are clearly meant to lock into each other, but they're mirrored, so you need two of the same part. Anyways, you end up with this complete abomination, which is kind of really fun. But I think that both the best and worst thing that this does is this absolute train wreck, where you take Trashmaster's rear legs and add them to Scraphook like a giant superpowered engine that runs 6 wheels in reverse order. It's so almost awesome. It so almost works. But unfortunately, once again, their hips aren't the same width apart, so that forces one of the legs to be unpegged, and it is impossible to have the door flaps down, so this barely holds together. There's some fun to be had here, but all of the coolest stuff you can make out of this doesn't really work the best because they didn't standardize this guy at all. And it's fair to say that while I like this guy, I don't love him. There's a lot here that's excellent. The robot mode looks great, but it also looks unfinished in a weird way. It's not missing any part, but it just gives off the energy of a rough draft. However, the figure does at least feel premium, more so than the other two of this set, so I can really give it that point. The weapon is fun in theory, but it attaches so badly that it's too frustrating to bother using when he has a better option in his enchilada fist nipples. The posability is really good. That part has no notes, outside of the butt flap being a little irritating. The transformation is pretty good, but unlike his brethren, there is actually mandatory parts forming. You could just leave the weapon off, but then the back looks minorly unfinished. It's not as bad as Cliff Jumper, but it's still annoying. And if you don't want it to be more frustrating than it has to be to handle this guy in robot mode, you will have to parts form off his butt flap and his two timeless actuator arms that serve no purpose. And then the alt mode is just kind of a wreck. Even when entirely by itself, it looks like it was cobbled together out of several other vehicles, to the point where it almost looks better and more cohesive when you just start slapping the other junkizers onto him. At least now it feels earnest in its slapdashedness rather than a mistake, like something I'd see in Mad Max or some post-apocalypse movie. At the end of the day, with reviews like this, I just have to ask myself, is this figure fun? And to that I'd say that yes, it is a solidly fun toy. I definitely enjoy it. But at the same time, it is a figure with so many issues that I also don't think that you need it. If you got better things to spend your money on, use it for that. Feel free to buy it. You'll probably like it, but I doubt that you'll love it, and I'm not comfortable putting my full recommendation on it. Though I doubt that you'll hate it. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough of what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.